My name is Emanuel Pastreich, and I have declared myself as an independent candidate for President of the United States in the 2020 presidential election. I have been a teacher for most of my career, teaching primarily at the university level, but also in high school, starting back in 1998 at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and I have lived in California and in Connecticut and in Massachusetts in the course of my career. My specialty is Asian studies, covering the cultures and histories of Japan, Korea, and China. More recently, my writings have expanded to include culture, politics, security and economics, and the impact of technology on our society. I made up my mind early that Asia was going to be clearly central in the international community, and that it would be critical for the next generation, and I guess I thought of myself as the next generation back then, to have a deeper understanding of Asia and to be able to engage with Asians with at least the level of sophistication with which they engage with us Americans. I also spent part of my career in Japan and in Korea. And that experience not only gave me an understanding of what the United States will need to respond to an increasingly different and unfamiliar world landscape, but also that experience allowed me to see our country with greater clarity as an outsider from the outside. As president of the Asia Institute in Washington, D.C., a think tank that conducts research and holds discussions on diplomacy, security, and economic issues, I work to help Americans understand Asia accurately. I do so with a minimum budget, working with those committed to the truth and not to securing big funding. I could see from January of this year, 2020, here in Washington, D.C., that the entire federal government had shut down and that a dangerous cloud of uncertainty had descended over the institutions that determine our future as citizens. It was clear to me then that the current political system is totally incapable of addressing any of the serious challenges that we face, whether climate change, the concentration of wealth in the hands of the few, the global arms race, or the negative impact of technology on society. I looked around at the politicians, not just the candidates for president, but others too, and it was crystal clear to me that those politicians had fallen into empty rituals, into the repetition of phrases like magic incantations. We are no longer engaged in a dialogue with citizens about real issues, about science, or about our future. This political culture is not only disturbing, it is frightening. I could see signs, even in January, that the entire federal government was marching forward towards unmitigated catastrophe. I decided to declare myself as a candidate for president because there were no other candidates out there, even among the minor parties, that were addressing these serious challenges. I drafted my declaration over a period of several weeks with the conviction that nothing could be done in the United States unless we worked outside of the established system, and that only an independent candidate would be capable of moving the country in a healthy direction. When I mentioned this idea to my friends, most of them immediately responded that unless one has high media coverage, lots of funding from corporations and foundations, and deep connections to political parties, that there is no way that you can run for president, or even for Congress, or even for local government. Any such effort would be perceived as nothing more than a stunt. But when I heard these words, I felt only the more strongly that in the midst of the current chaos and uncertainty, that for me to make such a declaration could make a difference, if I did so. Not as an appeal to the corrupt institutions that dominate Washington, D.C. today, but rather as an appeal to the words and the spirit of the United States Constitution. This core document, rather than any particular individual, however famous or appealing they may be, is what defines the United States. Clearly, the Constitution recognizes me as fully qualified to make a bid for the presidency. Moreover, after I wrote my first speech and spoke with a variety of people, from working poor to teachers to restaurant employees, I came to believe that I was able to represent precisely the needs of this country because I have not accepted any external funding, and I was myself unemployed. As someone in the same position as the majority of Americans, I can represent them in a manner that privileged politicians could not possibly do. Established powers have erected high walls in Washington, D.C. to make sure that nobody like me will ever be covered in the media, will ever be invited to any events, will ever be considered as someone worth listening to. But this reality encourages me rather than discouraging me. So obvious is it to me that only a complete transformation of the politics of this country can save us, and that the two political parties wallowing in money and privilege cannot measure up tremendous task. Also, the so-called independents are incapable of mounting a serious campaign. Today's pundits and politicians, whether they call themselves progressive or conservative, fight with each other for the honor of offering up an unholy sacrifice before the filthy idol known as the corporate media. They dumb down their words, avoid critical topics, and bend over backwards to please the powerful. The media is a racket. It creates profits for corporations and denies us the right to understand what is happening in our own country. Other politicians assume that the corporate media has so much power to make or break anyone through slander or by cooked up scandals that they will not dare to look that false idol in the eyes. If the requirement for becoming president is having the backing of the rich, being praised by that corrupt media empire, then clearly I am totally unqualified. But the United States Constitution, which should always be our starting point, does not say anywhere that money or power are required to be president. I want to take the opposite position, to say that if the other candidates are taking money from investment banks, from multinational corporations, or from the super rich, directly or indirectly, that it is they and not I who are not qualified to be president. I am certain that if you read through my materials or listen to even a few minutes of my speeches, that it will be perfectly clear just how serious this campaign is. I am committed to you, the citizen, and I want my policies to reflect your insights. I have no interest in tired out phrases like conservative or progressive, designed to confuse and to divide us. Please let me know what you think, and let us work together to create new hope in the United States. Thank you for your valuable time.